Our first guest tonight is Anita Intenzo. Anita has been intrigued by the spirit world for many years in her profession of restoring antique dolls, photos, and arts. She incorporates the past into the present. The people in the photos, the first owners of the dolls, and the subjects of the artworks are all in her mind as she works. Her story is so interesting. I am just going to go ahead and bring her on. Anita, good evening. Welcome to K-Talk and the Fringe Radio Show.
Oh, good evening, Pat and Carol. Really glad to be on your show tonight.
Oh, we're glad you're here.
Yeah, we are glad you're here. Your story, Anita, is so interesting in the work that you do. Why don't you give our listeners a little bit of the backstory, how you got into what you do and your restoration and your art. I mean, this is interesting.
Well, I've been an artist for as long as I can remember. Went to art school in Philadelphia and succeeded with a degree in art education and worked in the educational field for a number of years. Then I got into, just sort of by chance, into photographic restoration, and I took it from there to start expanding, working with other people's paintings and other types of maybe statuary things that needed to be restored, and also took upon some jobs to start restoring antique dolls, and that has really been a wonderful and very interesting sideline for me to use my techniques of restoration and materials that I had learned along the way to be able to restore people's precious treasures and their really wonderful old photos so they can be then appreciated and conserved for future generations. So I was trained in the fine arts. I am a painter, and I have many of my oil paintings, portraits, landscapes, and still lifes are hanging in many collections throughout the United States. And doing the types of work I've done, it just seemed like I had an affinity for restoring photographs and this other type of artwork. It just was a natural kind of a journey for me to start working with these types of things. And it's just very rewarding. I've been doing it for at least 30 years, and I have my own business, Past Images by Anita, that's also on a website that I have. And by doing these types of things, I meet many interesting people, and one happened to be a person who was an anthropologist and became very good friends with me for over 30 years, and he is the gentleman who is the subject of my book that I just had published, A State of Horror, and it just goes from there into a really incredible encounter with ghosts and poltergeist activity that is beyond anything I ever could imagine 5 years ago. So it's really, my sideline just got into this, and my journey is continuing.
That's awesome.
It sounds awesome. Now, your website, well, again, it's your name, but it's Past Images by Anita. You do all kinds of. I was looking through the site, and you do beautiful stuff. You do. Do you do a lot of digital? I mean, do you do a lot of handwork, artwork? Do you do digital restoration? What kind of things? What do you do? I mean, what are some of the things that you do? How do you do them?
Well, I started out. I do a lot of things by hand. The fine arts, especially cleaning and restoring old paintings for people. Also, if there's drawings, different things that need to be hand done, that's what you need to do. I started also working with hand restoration on old photographs 30-something years ago before we had digital. But in 1996, I was hired by a company who hired me just as a portrait and fine artist and taught me in the Photoshop software program. And then within several months, I became their head restoration artist for this company, and I was responsible for doing literally thousands of old photographic restorations for people. Some of them were not too old, but they had faded and things needed to be restored. They were maybe waterlogged, maybe stuck to glass. And so I've been able to use all my fine art techniques and incorporated them with a newer technology, and it was a great marriage between the old and the new. And then I became, as I said, their head restoration artist until 2000, when the company was bought out and was sold to another company. So then I have my own studio, Past Images by Anita, that I was able to cross over and continue to do the work for other clients and historical groups, genealogy groups. Many people consult me with old photos to say, what do I do about conserving this? Can you make me copies? This is the only one in existence. And it's very rewarding. Every single job is different and unique, and it makes my job so interesting because of what types of work that I get in here, the historical references, the really interesting images. And so some of my work I do paint. I'm a portrait painter, do landscapes and still lifes, mostly oil, but I also do watercolor, and I also do some sculpting. But the sculpting usually is working towards restoring the antique dolls, and that has been such a really fun sideline because, again, I'm getting to see historical type pieces, toys that were in existence from over 100 years ago, and then to complete them and restore them for, to hand them down to other generations. So it's quite satisfactory and really it's a happy job to have.
Have you ever been here in Utah? Have you ever heard of the Daughter of Pioneer Museum out this way?
Yes,
That's an awesome place. I don't know if you've been there or not, but
I haven't been there per se, but I knew people who had worked there, and I've been out to Utah at least a half a dozen times, but it hasn't been recent. And I just love Utah. It's one of my favorite states out west.
When you get a chance, come out here and check that out. It's really cool. I have well, after my father passed away, I found a couple pictures, and I wasn't quite sure. Well, I had them. I went into the Daughter of Pioneer, and I saw they had the same picture there, so I realized, because I knew my grandmother was a baby on the trail, the Pioneer Trail. And so it's just amazing, the pictures there and the dolls and the artifacts. It's amazing. I love that. And it's free, too. It's a free museum. You just can give a donation or whatever, but it's pretty amazing.
One thing, Anita, like looking through your art restoration, and this is, and again, this is the talent that you possess to do these things. Like looking through some of your your work where you go through and you do this restoration, smoke has got to be a huge thing. I mean, nowadays, smoke. Years back, it seemed like everybody smoked, and I'm sure that you get a lot of stuff, a lot of smoke-laden pictures and stuff in, especially if they weren't under glass.
To
be able to clean those up, this has got to be great for the families that you work for when they bring in these old pictures that, maybe there was only one or two of, and be able to put them back to the way they were.
Yeah, and the dolls are amazing. I'm looking at some of your pictures, and I can't believe
your work is amazing.
It's just broken, and then you made it look so beautiful.
Yeah. It's always a challenge, but it's a happy challenge to see if you're able to restore these. But to get back what you mentioned, Pat, yes, probably the most destructive types of things that can affect a painting, which is not under glass if it's an oil, I have them brought into me with terrible nicotine staining on them, and I do have special cleaners. If they're on a canvas or canvas board, it's you're able to just go through it's like a yellow-brown gunk that's actually on the surface of these paintings, and you wonder, this is in people's lungs that they're smoking, if this is what's on a painting through so many years, if you were a heavy smoker in the environment. So, or even if the pictures maybe hung over a fireplace for many years, the smoke, soot, just dirt embeds into most pictures. If they haven't been cared for, maybe say didn't have a glaze, like a varnish is really put over a finished work of art, just to really act as a barrier so the pollution and other factors do not harm the surface of the painting. So if they haven't been preserved that way, then it tends to embed and permanently stain into the certain colors of the painting. So that sometimes I'm able to, of the staining, and it's cleaned off, and it's like 100% better, but there's always a little bit of tiny residue that you have nothing that you can do for this unless repaint areas, which you don't want to do. You want to keep the historical provenance and the piece intact. But it also affects, well, as you mentioned, Carol, I'll always know if somebody brings in a doll. The dolls are very affected, too, because it gets into the wigs, it gets into their clothing, and they have a smell that it's just really horrendous when you're starting to clean. The actual, when you wet or try to wash some of the clothing, if it's possible, there's just a horrible odor or when the nicotine hits the water, but I use a very special, very gentle type of cleaner if possible. If it's silk clothing, then we have to be very careful. You can't wet that. It has to be usually cotton and linen and some other types of durable materials will stand a really thorough cleaning. And it's so nice to see when the doll has been cleaned up. Even the skin tone of the doll might have looked yellow, and when you wash it, it's a beautiful rosy tone, which that's what the color of the bisque was. So it's very gratifying to me when I can take something that's pretty much ready to be thrown in the trash that people think, and then I'm able to salvage, as much as I can of it. Or if it needs a new wig, we keep the original wig, even if it's ratty looking, and maybe you won't want to put it on the doll, and we try to get something as close as to the original as possible. But we always try to keep the original clothing and anything else tied in with the doll, even though she might have a new outfit, because all that just sustains the value of the piece. Yes.
Do you have people shipping stuff to you from all over the world, Anita?
I did have people sending things from Canada, New Zealand, some people from Germany. I don't do it too often because of it's really gotten high pricing with shipping things, and you're always worried about things breaking, because once something this unique breaks, you can't, you can get the value of the insurance, but it's not the piece. And I've had some pieces sent to me, even locally, that haven't been packed right. Maybe a piece that I've bought on an auction, and it comes shattered. So, you're just totally broken-hearted when you see that, because, their carelessness of not doing a double packing means that, okay, now I've got to search for another doll head that I had planned a few years ago. It took me that long. It's about maybe 3-4 years. I had a doll body with a gorgeous velvet French outfit that was made for it, but the head had been a reproduction, and I figured, well, I can always replace this whole thing with an antique doll head, and I'll have a really wonderful doll. So the head that I had ordered was a German doll head, very lovely and was very reasonable, but when I got it, it was completely shattered, and and the girl did not even seem to be that concerned, and I said, well, gee, you'll get the insurance money for it. I said, well, that's not the point. I don't have the doll head. And it took me 3-4 more years, and I finally found another doll head. The girl was so lovely and so concerned about me getting this after I explained my other tragedy with a doll head, and she repacked it twice, made sure it was solidly packed, and I got it in perfect condition. I put the doll together and actually sent her a photo of what the doll looks like now, and she was so thrilled to see this doll head that was dirty and had been packed in some storage unit that they had come across old doll parts, and she said, I can't believe, what a beautiful piece you made of this. And she's sitting on a little chair in my living room. She came out so beautiful, the doll, that I bought this doll head. So that's a lot of fun, when you can do that.
One of our listeners wrote in and said, Anita, have you ever turned down a restoration, for example, when objects lose value and a restoration is not the object? Do you sometimes tell people, hey, I don't want to even touch this?
Yes. What I'll try to do is I try to see within a dollar value, because I do appraisals for people, if it's something that I feel is beyond what I can do, maybe the whole back of the canvas needs to be relined, and there's only a special machine, a pressure machine, that you have to go to a museum or to a very, very specialized conservation company, that I'll refer them to something. It doesn't happen too often, because if it's a small tear or if it's something that needs to be refitted onto stretcher sticks, or if something needs to be built up on a corner, I can do all these patches. And, in fact, I've worked with other galleries and subcontract with them and do that type of thing. But when it's something that's really a terrific tear and it's very badly damaged, then I have to refer them, and it's going to cost quite a bit of money, and they're hesitant because they know it's going to be pretty expensive. But I won't touch something if I know I can't really do justice to it, or if it is a very unique historical piece that, its insurance value is pretty high. So then they should really look into getting another expert appraisal. So it doesn't happen too often, and people usually want me to do the work because of my reputation, but a few times I've had to refer them, and then they're quite happy with the referral, and actually the gallery or the person will call me and say, thank you for referring them, but I understand, this was pretty intense, where this thing was ripped, and he said, this is the only way we can do this, by relining it all with new canvas on the back. So that happens, and sometimes I have to turn away photographs that are so faded and so destroyed by light and water, there's no image to even try to scan or to try to do anything with. So I don't want the people to waste their money, and I'll say to them, look, if I could do something with this, I would try my hardest, but it's absolutely, there's nothing really here. And that hasn't happened too often either. Usually I can get, even if a face is partially missing, I try to use aspects of the face. Being a portrait artist, I have that affinity and that knowledge. Or I'll ask them, do you have another picture of the same person or a family member that's very close that maybe I could look at the features and maybe incorporate them and complete the face? And that's happened a few times, and we've been able to do a really nice completed job that way too. So I try everything I can, and try to invent new ways to try to bring this image out, and even in tintypes. I'm one of the few people who will even scan the old tintypes, and I get some really amazing images that I'm able to work with on the computer. And some of these date from the Civil War, so that's really gratifying when.
That is.
Yeah,
I'm
when you have
excited
someone.
to talk. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I just looked over your book, and I'm so excited to talk about it. I didn't.
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Speaking of one of the questions that came in, if we could kind of move to the paranormal side of it, one of our listeners wrote and said, "Have you ever worked on any of these objects, whether maybe it's a doll or a photo? And have you ever had any materials that carry maybe some spiritual residue or spiritual energy, or maybe you look at you see that interesting image or shadow or mark or something on a photo, pick something up."
Well, I haven't had many experiences even with all the antique dolls. Some people have asked me that. They said, don't you get creeped out with the dolls, in the cases? I've always collected dolls since I was a little girl. But I did have one incident which was really surprising to me about 2 years ago. A woman had come in with some dolls from her great aunt who had passed away, had traveled all around the world, and she brought me a little Welsh doll with a little type of hat that looks like a witch's hat. That's where we get that whole idea of the top hat or the witch's coned hat, that it comes from a Welsh type of regional hat, and of course it's been modified to more of a pointy existence. But I had this doll, it was completely apart, and I promised her, I said, look, let me see what I can put the doll back together. And as I worked on that little doll in my studio, I had several things that were on my shelf just flipped right off the shelf and fell into the middle of the room. And I looked up, I go, that was interesting. That's never happened before. And it wasn't that it was a really old doll. It was maybe 50 years old, but that was really quite unique that happened to me. And, and being that I've been in the situation with poltergeist, I knew immediately that's not something that just slipped off the shelf. That was actually flipped off the shelf and did a 360 onto the floor. And that was surprising to me. Yeah.
Very interesting. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, or a lot about, your paranormal, your book, and about your paranormal experiences. What happened, Anita?
If you've read some of these things in it, it started 5 years ago. Never really was the type of person that was involved with ghost excavations or going on these hunts. I just enjoyed watching the TV shows, and I was called suddenly. Becoming an executor to my deceased friend. He was good friends with me for 30 years, anthropologist, a professor, also a writer, and he died suddenly of a heart attack at 55. So I was, plunged into all of a sudden this grief because by the time I got to the hospital, he had already passed, and there was nothing they could do for him. He had had such a horrific blowout in one side of his heart that they could not save him. So after I was, with the lawyer and getting to know the responsibilities, I then entered in his house. I had not been at his house for a few years, but it turned out that he had been hoarding for so many years that I would only see maybe if I went in for lunch or visited him, it would just be maybe 2 rooms, not realizing when I got into his house the night that he passed, by not being there for 2 years, I was walking single file into things from floor to ceiling, just piles and piles everywhere. And as my son and I, who came with me because he did not want me to go alone to the house, we opened different bedrooms, and there was just stuff crammed everywhere. And my son and I just looked at each other, and I just said, I did not know how ill he was, that he had been, hoarding and had been very, almost reclusive. If he did visit, it would be at my house for dinner or for lunch. And I didn't suspect anything really too much wrong, because he would make up things to say, well, I'm going to be away downtown. And, and he didn't really give me the impression that it was that bad at his house. But I was in for a real shock when I got in there that night into his home and saw the condition of it. And we were just really concerned for those next few months just to clean out the house, which was room after room, and the basement was another story entirely. It was a huge basement that went under the whole ranch-style house, and it was also filled from floor to ceiling with everything and anything you could imagine, Tupperware bins just filled with things not labeled. So I knew just at the very beginning I had a big job ahead of me, and the lawyer said, well, you're the executor and you're in charge of this, and, you have to see what kind of help you're going to get. And we did not have any idea of things really starting to be of any type of paranormal nature until about 4 or 5 months into cleaning the house, and we were putting 40 hours a week to do this. I sort of put my art business, had to go on the sidelines. I had been taking care of both my parents, my dad had Parkinson's, my mom had suffered a heart attack in 2008, and I was actually taking care of 3 households at one time, because I was going there to help them, and then when my friend passed, it was was too much you could even handle. But my son was a great help to me, and really boosted my morale. But we had no idea. There was a few little weird things that happened that we were just chalking up for coincidence. But until May of 2009, we had been going there since January. We had to get a contractor into the basement. We had a lot of flooding, and there was black mold and a lot of very hazardous health conditions in the basement. We started wearing masks and rubber gloves just to go through the things that we had to go through, because we needed to find 43 separate items in a 7-page will that my friend had allocated to charities and to people, and I had no idea where any of these things were. So we had to literally go through thousands and thousands of pieces of paper. And as we cleared out the basement with this contractor, the day before we were having these people come, we had to clear out the rest of a 45-foot wall section of the back of the basement, and I had my son and a friend helping me just to cart trash bags up and getting that area cleared before the men came with the jackhammers and actually breaking up so they could put a drain and a sump pump in. Well, we were going about our business, and my son kept saying to me, what keeps falling? What keeps being thrown off a shelf? And I said, well, Chris, I said, I mean, maybe you're just dislodging things because there's so much in piles. So we didn't think of anything of it, and we continued. We were so focused on clearing things out with the schedule. So then suddenly he jumps and comes over to me. He said, Mom, something just flew right by my face and crashed against the wall. I said, really? I said, what's going on? He says, I have no idea. He said, you have to see this. So as I walked over to him and I passed the staircase, and my friend had just gone upstairs to take a load of trash to the curb, something black goes by my face, and I start screaming. And he said, what was it? I said, I don't know. Something black went by me. Then we looked at the ground, and it was a leather glove. And so my son said, well, he said, what's doing this? I said, I don't know. I said, I've never seen anything like this. So this continued for a few hours. Our friend, as he came down the stairs, was very skeptical. And I said, no, you have to come down. There's things really flying through the air. He goes, oh, come on. He said, what are you guys saying? And as he walks down the steps, here a seashell flies by his face and goes into a bin. And I said, see? I said, I don't even know what's causing this, but there's things flying around. And my son pipes up and said, well, have you ever seen the movie Poltergeist?
Right.
And our friend said, well, I don't watch those scary ghost movies. I said, well, if you ever saw that movie, it's things that just fly on their own, and there's no control over it. So he then starts seeing things for the next few hours, and it just got crazy. So that was the beginning, Pat and Carol, of the next 5 months as we continued to clean out the house. We had incident after incident, which I document in my book, of the most crazy poltergeist orbs, shadows, EVPs, things moving on their own right in front of you, just unbelievable. And I started documenting in a diary every day that we were there. I started writing down these things, and then we started documenting with recorders, a camcorder, and even friends who came to come in, and we wouldn't say anything at the beginning. They just knew something was up, and they would help us at the house. And by the end of the day, they would just say to us, I'm not coming back here. I helped you today. I can't come back. I'm too scared. And it was pretty intense time.
Was the stuff? I mean, was it just flying off the shelves, Anita, or just the stuff would come shooting out of nowhere?
It was everything you can imagine. It was things flying off a shelf, which we literally saw as we're standing. You could see a can. It would like sort of vibrate, and then it would move a little bit, and then it just flop off the shelf. Or we'd be sitting in the kitchen having something to drink because it was such long days we put in, and literally sitting at the table and seeing a black magic marker in a little tub or a can and see it flip through the air and go into the sink. And we'd look at it and I'd say, did you just see that? Or we would be starting to move things, and from another room, things come flying from a bedroom down a hall into the living room, like a pen or a comb or a penknife, or it would be a pillow from the couch would flip over into the other part of the room. And I'd be on the phone with my mom. I said, well, Mom, I'll call you when we get back. We're going to be here for some hours. And she would hear me go, wow, what was that? She goes, Anita, what's going on? I go, Mom, a pillow just flipped from one chair onto the sofa. She goes, well, please be careful. She'd be so worried about us being at the house. And there would be, we had phantom phone calls. We had phone calls being made to a number that we have just now recently been able to track down. Calls would be made 4 o'clock in the morning at the house that nobody was there. It would go to this phone number in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, which is a long-distance call. We had the long-distance service taken off the phone, so we had no idea how these calls were going through. So when I contacted the phone company, they did they said, well, it's a private number, but the phone calls are coming from that residence at 4:05 in the morning. And she said, from what I see in the logbook, it's happening every week the same day and the same time. I said, yes, and this has been going on for 4 months. And I said, you're charging us for a 1-minute call that's actually connecting. So she said, no, we'll take off the charges. We believe you. But she said, that's the strangest thing I've ever heard. I said, strange doesn't even describe the situation I'm in. And it was just like, you didn't want to tell them too much, but they were just left like, okay, you're not making the call. I go, no one's making the phone call. And she said, does he have a computer? Does he have any other type of fax machine? I said, no. I said, he'd never used a computer. He's one of these people who used to write on an old word processor. He didn't have a fax machine. I said, he barely even had caller ID connecting if he even used that. I said, that's how very non-technical this person was. And that's just one of the instances of just very strange poltergeists and other things going on that we had no explanation for.
Did you ever suspect him to be a hoarder, Anita? I mean, did you expect him? Did you figure he was that kind of person?
No. I'll tell you, he hid this so well. And when I visited up until 2001, when his mom was still alive, when I was asked over the house for coffee or tea or having dessert or dinner, the place was immaculate. I mean, the kitchen, living room, and dining room is only what I saw, and the bathroom. But I had no idea after his mom passed away, those next 8 years, he was just going overboard, collecting and buying things. And what I saw was, in some ways, sort of a hoarding, but organized hoarding, that he had just closets crammed full of so many things. He never got rid of any of his mother's clothing. And we're talking about, in the basement, 15 wardrobes of clothing with at least 300 items of clothing in each wardrobe, that he never got rid of anything of his mother's. And just shoes and bags and hats and suitcases still filled with things from a last trip that they never unpacked. It was just almost like a Pandora's box. You did not know what you were opening up, what to find. And I knew he collected really lovely things from his travels, and he used them in many of his lectures for the different clubs that he lectured to and for his classes. But I had no idea until I actually got in the house how bad it really was. And this really played into, I think, a mental condition that he was deteriorating for those last few years. And it just broke my heart to think that he kept this a secret, that he did not reach out to me.
Yes.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Fringe Radio Show. Anita, it is such an honor to have you here tonight to talk about your work and your book.
Yes, it is.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm just so happy to be on your show and to share this with your listeners.
Now, first of all, if people want to have work done by you and people want to buy the book, where do they go?
Well, the best thing would be to go to www.astateofhorror.com. That's our website, and that will take them to multi-pages. If they were to go to AnitaJoIntenzo.com or pastimagesbyanita.com, they're all centrally the same website, and we just recently got the domain for A State of Horror. So that will take them to the pages. It will show them if they want to click to buy the book, and it's on Amazon and Kindle under A State of Horror and Create Space Store. And we are really doing a very, very well with the sales. It's been so gratifying. It's only 2 months the book has been out, and the sales have hit over 600 books at this point. And we've had, on Kindle, we are up number 3, I think, under the Supernatural title, and number 4 under Unexplained Mysteries. So, and we've had 5-star reviews. I am so thrilled with that people have responded so well to the book. It's just wonderful.
Yeah, that is great.
Yeah, it's such an interesting story. Now, I know people need to read the book, but there's got to be more to this.
Mm-hmm.
I know.
Oh, yeah.
On break, I was asking Pat, I'm like, do I wonder if she wants to tell us
we
this, or we got to kind of
give us a few Easter eggs, as they call it.
Well, it's not just a simple haunting. As we progressed with the house, and it was getting closer to a time where we were going to sell it to the contractors, and then they gutted the house and then resold it, we had to confront the idea that we had spirits, that we were really, there was an intelligent haunting going on, and we had the poltergeist activity, there was residual haunting going on, and it was almost like they call it the trifecta of having all these things come into play to have a real haunted house. And we, at the time, didn't call it a haunted house, and my son and I were real novices at this, and we started then reading up a little bit more to see what are we exactly dealing with here, because we were very naive about the background with the paranormal community. So as we started to understand a little bit more, I knew I was in pretty much, there was the contact. My friend didn't realize he had passed so suddenly, and I really believed that he was trying to give us messages or try to get our attention at the house. So I then called in some paranormal investigators. One group came in August, and they stayed for a few hours. I hadn't been aware of how they would conduct any type of investigation. I'd seen things on TV, but they brought their equipment. They tried to do an investigation, but you know, when you're at a house like my son and I were for 5 months, you have a collective knowledge or a collective experience of how these things are coming about. And when you have people come in who've never been in the house before, you know, I don't know what they expect, and they were provoking. They were trying to make things happen, and things did happen while they were there, but for some reason we got the feeling that it wasn't enough to sustain their interest for the long haul, and they were only there for a few hours, and then they promised that they would be maybe coming back, or gave us some ideas that maybe because of all the amounts of items in the house, these spirits were anchoring to those things, and because we were getting rid of things, they were getting back at us, or they were upset because these familiar things in the house were no longer there. And that made sense to me, but we also had a woman who had been part of the team, was a psychic medium, and she was very, very good because she seemed to pick up on things and give us some knowledge of the backstory of what this haunting was really about. And I said, I know my friend, you know, he collected a lot of things, and I said, I just figured it was maybe him. And she says, oh, no. She said, there's more spirits here. She said, you're dealing with part of the family is coming in and out here. So that surprised me that they told me they thought that his father, who had passed away in 1994, could have possibly been also there, but he was earthbound. He had not crossed over. And that was really very shocking to us because it looked like my friend didn't want to leave without the father coming with him. And, I mean, this is what I'm being told by this medium. And I said, well, is there a reason? She goes, well, there's a lot to this. She said he does not want to move on. She said your friend is ready to move on, but through one of the so they left it at that. I mean, they gave us more questions than answers. Mm-hmm. So after they left that evening, we still were confronting some really serious stuff. We had a culmination of a lot of activity one particular day. We had signed paperwork as a temporary sign over that we had agreed that the house could be sold. And as soon as we left the lawyer's office and went back to the house to meet with a man who was like an antique dealer, but I would say that the things in the house were not really antique, but he was coming to pick up some cabinets and some other odds and ends that we were grateful because he had a truck and he wasn't going to charge us. We went there, and as soon as we walked into the house, we heard dripping water. And my son said, "Did you leave the faucet running?" I said, "No." I said, I don't even think I used the bathroom a day or two ago. And I went into the bathroom, and here it's flooded with water, and it wasn't coming from the sink. It was coming from, looked like the toilet. So I quickly got a wrench, and we were able to close off the valve. And I couldn't see where there was a leak, so my son rushed down to the stairs. And here, after we had cleaned up all this debris and had the sump pump installed, there was over an inch of water. Half of the basement was flooded from the water dripping from the bathroom, coming down through the ceiling, and just been doing that for probably a couple of days. So that was really, really scary. I said, I mean, how did this happen? I said, I have people coming here, and now there's all this water. So my son immediately started to take a broom to push it into the sump pump drain because there was no other way for this water to leave, on top of the concrete. And I rush upstairs to call an emergency plumber, and the phone's dead. And I said, why is this phone dead? I said, it was working yesterday or the day before. So then I go back down to get my son's cell phone, and he starts yelling before I even get down the stairs. He said, Mom, there's someone walking through the water. I could actually see a figure, and it was bubbling. It was actually the weight of him wading through the water. He could see this dark figure, and he was really scared. And I said, really? He said, Chris, what are you seeing? I said, I don't know, Mom. He said, this is really scary. He said, and he kept just pushing the water. He just kept doing it repetition. And then I went back upstairs to make the call, and all I got was the plumber's, it went to voicemail. I said, well, that's not an emergency number. I don't know when this man's going to get back to me. So then I called the lawyer's office and spoke with their assistant who had known what we were going through, and she heard how frantic I was. And she goes, look, Anita, she says, I'll get our emergency plumber. And she says, I'm coming over. I said, well, you have to come over here and see what's going on. I no sooner got off the phone, and these loud bangs and booms are just, someone was like taking these invisible fists and banging against the walls and just vibrating in the whole house. And I was really scared. And my son kept yelling for me. He said, Mom, you got to come down here. And as I went down, I could even hear the bangs following me down the stairs. And he said something like, well, we'll put buckets to get the water that's dripping. And as I did that, no sooner I laid the buckets down and the water's dripping in, and the buckets are flying across the room. And he said, Mom, I don't think they wanted us to sell the house. I said, what are we supposed to do? And all of a sudden, a big piece of duct pipe, about 7 feet long, aluminum duct pipe, flew over near us. And then parts of a Celotex ceiling from the other part of the basement just like flipped like a frisbee came in. And we were just like, I said, you know what? I've had it. I said, I'm really terrified that something's going to hurt us. So, we just said a quick prayer, and we just ran up and went outside to wait for the plumber and the lawyer's assistant. And then things, by taking that 15, 20 minutes, we were hoping things would calm down because we had no idea for the plumber to come into the house. Is this going to be meeting him also? But he came in and he looked at the situation, and the lawyer's assistant came, and he said, you have a fine crack in the back of the toilet tank. I said, really? I said, nobody's been here. He said, well, did somebody fall against it? Did someone by any chance maybe try to move this? I said, look, no one's been in this house for a day or two. I said, this was working fine a few days ago. He said, well, that takes a lot of pressure for that to crack that way. And he said, that's really strange. He said, there's no temperature changes here. It's moderately, it's around 70 degrees in the house. It's like 80 degrees outside. So, but he checked downstairs. He said the water has stopped dripping. He said it will clear out. We put some fans, but we didn't know what to tell him. He said, you're going to have the place gutted. It didn't damage the heater and anything else. But the assistant stayed with us after the plumber left, and she shook her head. She goes, what's been going on, guys? I said, if you stay here for a little while, I said, I doubt that you are going to be disappointed that there's going to be something going on here, because it's been constant since we've entered this house. So I was busy then with a gentleman who was buying some things in the garage, and I later, out of the corner of my eye, my son came out with the assistant, and he said, she's had it, Mom. She can't go back in there. And I said, what happened? He said, she's been initiated into the house. She saw things fly across the room, and she goes, I'm not going back in there. So it was just crazy things. And we did get another group who came in to make contact to try to find out what was the messages, and it left us very puzzled and very scared. And we knew that he did what he could to warn us about what kind of condition he left us in with the house and objects that we had collected. And I thought, gee, thanks a lot. Thanks for warning us now, because, actually the deed's been done, and one of the people said to me, the second group who came in were excellent, and they still are connected with us today. She said to me,
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, do you get a sense, Anita, that he was being tortured by something for years?
I think it was a combination of secrets the family had that he couldn't share, things that he was not in the best of health in the last few years. He felt guilty that he couldn't do more, even though he did everything possibly to stay with his mother and take care of her. He also was very, I would say, secretive about things that he collected, and also he did not know what he got himself involved in by collecting some of the objects he did. He did not know the power of some of these things. He really, I think, hurt himself in a very physical and mental way, because now we've learned the more things that we're finding out about some of these objects he collected from South America could possibly have maybe made his short life. It could have been a factor in contributing to him being very ill, and also the mental pressures on him and stress. I just feel so bad, that he did not share more of it with me. I mean, he kept it a pretty good face. He just did not tell people exactly what he was dealing with. And now I see all these things, and it just keeps coming out. And we just keep finding more and more things all the time, even 5 years after, and it's incredible. It's an incredible journey we're still on.
Yeah, are you going to write another book anytime soon?
Sequel coming out?
Yes, we are working on a sequel, and I'm having my son work with me as a co-author.
Oh, cool.
Probably the worst thing that's come out of this is what has affected my son. He was targeted at the house and was made very sick at different times, that he had to go to the doctor. He would be maybe psychically or physically attacked, and then he's a pretty easygoing kid. He's now married, and he's very, very honest type of person, very hardworking, very artistic. But he has become a real psychic medium now. The psychic gifts that have come to him, and they probably were latent. Now that I think back about him as a young child, he's very sensitive, but these gifts have really surfaced big time. And the things that he has dreamt about, things that have come out that we are now cataloging his dreams, and really incredible connections he has been able to make for us that we're discovering more about the family. They are German background. We are now looking into a real big connection with World War II and Nazi Germany, and it's just incredible what we're finding out.
I'd love for you to send us a book, and I'm sure it's one of those books you can't put down.
Yeah.
Definitely. In fact, I just had ordered some books because I've had some friends that said, could you just order some books, Anita, and we'll buy them from you because people are going on Kindle, they're going on Amazon, and I would love to send you a book. Yes, you'll have to email me.
We'll get you back on.
We've got to wrap up. The hour went way too quick, but we want to get you back up. When is your next book due out?
Right now there is no set time, but we're hoping by late summer, early fall. I have an agent who has been so wonderful, and she is working with us. But we're also fielding maybe movie and TV deals at this point. So we don't know how we're going to get sidetracked, but we do have. It's all outlined. It's just that we have to finish writing the chapters. So, we're going to try. We've had so many people who've read the book. They said, I can't wait for the sequel. And I said, I wish I could write the sequel as fast as, people are reading the book. And it's a wonderful thing. It was very tragic for me. I've lost both my parents in the last 2 years. They had wanted to see this book come out, but I know that they are, in heaven, and they're sending their many blessings to me because I am very, very blessed and gratified for my friendship and my family who are backing me up, and lovely people as yourselves that were so interested in contacting me and have me on your show.
Well, and we'll stay in touch.
And it's a State of Horror.
It's State of Horror, and it's Anita Jo Intenzo, Intenzo. That's where they can get it. Anita, thank you so much.
Thank you. And we'll get you
we
back
will
on
stay in touch, and we will get you back on very soon.